Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 7 of The Road to Purpose. My name is Angus, and in this episode today, we're going to be talking about my lessons from 18 months of sobriety, 18 months without drinking alcohol, which I did between the ages of 22 and 23. But because of my age, I know that's only a year, but it was 18 months. Trust me. So was a interesting period of my life, and I want to go into some more detail about it. I did briefly mention it in the previous episode of the podcast, episode 6. We were talking about Buddhism, and during that time I was exploring faith a lot, and Buddhism was the main one that drew my attention. And one of the key teachings in Buddhism is to refrain from taking substances that cloud the mind. So when I decided to go sober, I thought it would be a good time. It was partially because I wanted to experiment with Buddhism, I must admit, but I thought it would be a good time to learn more about the faith and the practice and all that kind of stuff. So, as you guys can see, if you're watching on YouTube or watching on Spotify and not just with your headphones in on the bus or something like that, I'm in a new accommodation. I've just moved to a new Airbnb on the other side of Bogota. I'm in a very, very safe area of the city now. But previously, in the previous episodes, I mentioned I was in a not very nice area of the city. So I've just moved to this new area. It's called Usaken. I think that's how you say it, Usaken. And it's a lot safer. It's a lot nicer looking as well. I really like walking around the streets here. I went out this morning, try and find a local gym that I liked. I did go to one, but I wasn't a huge fan. It didn't have a great selection of weights. Ironically, the free weight area was pretty bad. So yeah, I've been walking around the area a little bit, and I went out this afternoon for a walk as well to check it out, explore. I'm near a mall as well, a Centro Comercial, which is a mall here. And yeah, I'm in a much nicer area of the city. The apartment's lovely. The lighting is the only thing I'm not as keen on as the previous place. As you can see, I think the quality of the video might not be as good because I've got overhead lighting, but it's not like there's nothing behind the camera, so it's not ideal. But anyway, we're here with another episode of the podcast. At the beginning of the last episode, I talked a lot about my personal life, and actually that was only a few days ago. I'm recording this like midweek. I recorded the last one on Sunday and released it on Monday. So yeah, today is Tuesday, so it's only been a couple of days. So not much has changed, but I moved to this part of the city, and I am currently speaking with an ulcer on my tongue, which is really annoying me. But I'm not going to let it ruin the podcast. I had the motivation to sit down and talk, so I wasn't going to let an ulcer stand in the way. Anyway, let's talk about sobriety. Let's talk about this crazy thing that some people, especially in the UK, can't even imagine doing. I remember when I first told my friends that I was sober or going sober, they could not understand it. I had people, one friend, I say friend, quote unquote friend in particular, I remember them specifically pressuring me to drink while I went to London to visit some friends, and one of them just was like pressuring me to drink, trying to make me feel bad about it. It was like, it makes no sense. It's none of your business, basically. And yeah, so I made this decision on returning from my backpacking trip to South America. So the last drink that I drank on that trip before I went sober was a cocktail in a bar in Miraflores in Lima on probably the penultimate night of my trip. And I remember this specifically because I know the date as well. I think I know the date. I think it was the 17th of September, 2022 was my last drink. And one of the things that's very interesting is if you want to do something like give up a habit or even start a new habit, a change in environment is a really, really good time to do that. So, for example, at the end of my trip, I was coming back to the UK, and the act of me finishing the mindset of traveling and it being any night of the week and I could have a drink because I didn't have a job, to going back to, okay, now I'm going to have a job again and I'm going to be sober now. The act of getting on the plane, in a way, enabled a bigger change. It was like a metaphor almost for a new page, turning over a new leaf. So I came back to England, and the first thing that a lot of my family and friends wanted to do was, "Oh, let's go for a drink," of course. And immediately I had to start saying, "No, listen, I've been drinking a lot." Well, actually, I hadn't been drinking that much while I was away. That's the thing. But I still made the decision that I wanted to give sobriety a try, just for like health reasons and to knuckle down a bit. So I was like, no, to a lot of people, if we go out, I'll be drinking soft drinks or I'll be driving. Well, and driving. They're not exclusive events. So I was like, okay, so, and it was fine. Like the majority of my friends and family were like completely understanding. Like maybe they thought it would be a month or 2 months. And so I should probably mention like my history with alcohol now. I would never have considered myself to be like an alcoholic or something, but I went to university in the UK, and anyone who's been to university in the UK, or maybe even worldwide, to be fair, or knows of friends who have been to university in the UK, you'll know that it's like a very much a party culture. And if you don't drink, it's actually very difficult to make friends. So I was going out a lot at university. I was drinking a lot. Maybe you could have considered me alcoholic within those 3 years, because the level which you need to drink to be alcoholic isn't actually that high. I was probably getting drunk at least once a week. I mean, there was fixed periods of time within that time at uni where I didn't drink, but yeah, probably once a week at least in term time, which is not healthy. Honestly, I can't even imagine doing that now. I've got a much nicer relationship with alcohol now, even though I do, as I mentioned before, I do now drink in moderation. So I had this phase at uni where I was drinking a lot, and I remember having a number of friends, like language exchanges from Latin America while I was learning Spanish, and they said, "Oh, you drink so much." I was like, "Oh, it's normal here, but I'll stop when I finish uni." So I finished uni, and I definitely controlled the habit a lot better, and I kind of had a better balance than at uni with alcohol. I would still, if I went to go and see friends, for example, I would still party hard and I'd get absolutely wasted. And that was a pretty ugly time. I'm thinking back at it now, and I'm thinking about a couple of memories. I'm going to share one of them specifically. I got a brand new phone in about October of 2021, I think it was, Google Pixel 6. And when I was studying in university, I went to a university in a city called Portsmouth. I'm just going to readjust myself a bit because I'm not central. I went to university in a city called Portsmouth, so I went back to visit some of my friends that still lived there. And I just got this brand new phone, and I just got the case for it before I went away. And I ended up getting really, really, really drunk and not remembering anything past a certain point in the night. And waking up in the morning to the screen of my phone being completely cracked, completely black, and not turning on. It's a brand new phone. I'm freaking out. I'm like, oh my God. I've ruined a brand new phone, which cost me like £700 or something. And I mean, that's not even an expensive phone nowadays. I know that, but I bought it like, I had it on a contract. That's the worst bit. So I had it on a contract. That's right. I ended up getting a new one, but yeah, it was because of my drunken stupidity that the first one I had broke. And so that was pretty peak, honestly. That's an English word for anyone who doesn't know. That means kind of like it's a bad situation. Kind of, I guess. It's kind of sarcastic. So I had a number of events where I just drank too much, ended up being really sick. Probably in the kind of like year that followed graduating uni, I kind of used alcohol as an outlet for bad mental health as well, which I'd never do now. If I'm feeling down, I never ever drink. Like it's such a bad idea. Honestly, it's the first thing you want to do, but you are going to pay the price for it the next day and the following days. It's a terrible idea. Anyway, so I went on this trip to Latin America for 3.5 months. And honestly, my drinking habits were not that bad. I mean, I would have like no more than like 1 or 2 beers of a night, but maybe a few times a week. So I wasn't getting like wasted. I mean, there was a couple of times in the beginning of the trip I was like, "Oh, hey, I'm in Colombia. I'm in the Caribbean. I'm going to go and party." And I did. And around Cartagena in Colombia, that was the place where that happened. And yeah, that was at the beginning of my trip. And then I kind of realized how much that was all costing. And I was like, okay, I need to make the money last. So I went on the trip, went to Peru. And in Peru, there's not so much of a party culture anyway, in general, compared to Colombia. Colombia is, if you want a party here, oh my God, like the parties are crazy. You can find anything, any time of the week, whatever you want. And I really don't make the most of it because number one, it's super expensive. Number two, it's really bad for you. And there's a lot of other things I like more about Colombia than the party. Anyway, so I went to Peru. And then I kind of made that decision in Peru that after this trip, I was going to try sobriety. So I ended up being sober for 18 months when I was back in the UK. And in that time, I consider that I was very productive. And that was actually, I went back to the UK with the goal of becoming a digital nomad and made it happen and got the remote job and everything like that. And I credit that to the fact that I wasn't going out on weekends and getting wasted because I was working very hard on learning new technologies and stuff like that. So it was a very focused time of my life. I was doing well with fitness. I was very happy in general in that time before I became a digital nomad. I mean, as a digital nomad as well, I've been generally happy apart from probably in the last 2 or 3 months, honestly. I'll probably do a deeper dive on why being a digital nomad is not what I expected. But if you can watch another episode of the podcast. Actually, I think it's episode 3, where I talk about my experiences as a digital nomad. And so I won't go into much detail now. But it was only in January of this year, 2024, when I decided to break sobriety. Why? Good question. The reason was I felt that there were certain cultural experiences I wasn't getting because I was refusing to drink alcohol. Now, I stayed in a few places in my first 2 months as being a digital nomad, and there was a number of good nights out and things like that where just to be a level of drunk, I think not just tipsy, maybe not even drunk, just have had a few drinks in me, I would have maybe enjoyed it a little bit more. I mean, the positives are that I didn't wake up with a raging hangover in any of those trips, but I genuinely felt in January of this year that I could control alcohol. I could control my urges to get wasted because I just didn't want that. You know what I mean? So in January of this year, I was in an Argentinian steakhouse in Barcelona. Very nice, right? With my family. And if you know anything about wine, you know that Argentinian wine is very nice, specifically Malbec. And they had some nice bottles of wine in there. And I was treating my parents as a Christmas gift to this meal. And I was thought, okay, well, we're going to order a bottle for the table. So I want to drink some. I want to drink this wine because it's very it's very high quality, and it wasn't cheap either. But I mean, that wasn't the main reason. I was like, I want to have the experience with the nice meat. And, I drank the wine. I was like, wow, the effects of wine. People say that different alcohols don't affect you in different ways, but I don't think that's true. For me, red wine puts me in a completely different mood to what, for example, if I drank a load of vodka or a load of beer. It's a completely different vibe. It's a lot more relaxed. I'm a lot more conversational, I guess. I feel a lot more, even though I've had some alcohol, I feel a lot more present after drinking red wine than I do after drinking beer. And then it could fall off a cliff very quickly. I could be like, "Whoa, bloody hell." But the point is, I decided to try some of the wine. I didn't have very much, and it was very good. And over the next month or so, there was a few times that I drank beer and maybe some other spirits as well. I don't really remember. But there was never a time where I got super, super wasted. And that's kind of been the theme ever since I started drinking again. I've had one heavier night with some friends here in Colombia. But the crazy thing is, I still have my tolerance from university. This blows my mind, right? So when I was in university, I used to drink a lot, but I came back to drinking alcohol. It's not as if I'm just getting drunk really quickly. It's like I still have this tolerance. So I can hold my own. I can drink a lot, and it's very deceiving. So I can drink quite a few beers and not be feeling particularly drunk, and then wake up the next morning and be like, whoa, that's heavy. So I think that in a way, knowing what the sacrifice is to get to the point of drunk as well, for me, it's not worth it anymore. And also, I hate the feeling of being hungover. I feel in general so depressed, so demotivated. I know this just sounds like whining, but I genuinely will take steps to avoid it. I mean, the most I'll really drink is probably maybe like five or six beers maximum, because I really, really do hate the next morning. And it's no bad thing to set that hard limit. At least you know you won't be spending a load of money on drinks, because it is a huge waste of money as well. That's something I noticed in the 18 months of being sober, is the money I was saving on not going out once a week and drinking to the point of being very drunk. And, you know, if you drink in bars as well, and as an adult, you don't really do pre-drinks like you did in uni, and it takes longer for you to get drunk. And then maybe the next day you buy some rubbish food. Honestly, the knock-on effects of having a heavy night, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Maybe here and there, even then, just control it to like a point if you can. But see, you're kind of playing with fire, and I am fully aware that I'm playing with fire by reintroducing it. But honestly, over the last few weeks, for example, I've been alone a lot. I haven't been socializing a lot. And in that time, like, I'll never pick up a beer on my own. I'll never like drink rum on my own. It's only when I like meet people. And even then, certain people, I'll maybe meet them in the daytime. I very rarely, for example, for a first date, if I was going on a first date with someone, I very rarely go, oh, let's go for drinks. I'd prefer to go for a coffee and then go for a walk, and then or do an activity that's kind of interesting. I like rarely, basically never, suggest going for drinks as a first date ever since university. Like, I think that's such a rubbish first date, because if you have to if you have to get a little bit drunk to like start the conversation, and then it's an easy way for someone to like maybe portray themselves in a bad light. And then the next time you see them, maybe you'll both be sober, but you'll refer to them as they were when they were drunk. And then it kind of like creates this weird balance. I don't think that's a good first date at all, unless it's something very casual and you're just looking for something like that, like a flick. Flick. If you're just looking for a fling, I'm gonna have to edit that out. It's so embarrassing. I said the word flick. No, I'll leave it in. It's funny. You're just looking for a fling or something like that, then yeah, okay, go for drinks. But generally, if I don't really date for that personally, I prefer to have some kind of connection with someone when I'm dating them, and I aim for something like a bit longer term in general. So I would never really go for drinks as a first date. Maybe one, maybe would be the exception. But yeah, I don't think it's a fantastic first date. Better to get the caffeine in and then tell them about how mentally unstable you are. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, so some of the lessons I learned in this 18 months is alcohol really does affect performance in fitness as well. If you want to get in shape and you want to do it extra quickly, probably the best thing you can kick is alcohol. And obviously get yourself in a calorie deficit if you want to lose weight. And if you're trying to put on muscle as well, don't put yourself in a calorie deficit, obviously, but definitely stop drinking, because your alcohol really ruins your recovery in the gym, which is very interesting. It's not an obvious effect that you might think of when you might think that, oh, most of the bad side effects of alcohol come on the next day with like a hangover or just, irresponsible behavior. But the truth is that, like, if you're working towards fitness goals, or, even if you're working towards maybe business goals or study goals, alcohol is going to ruin that. So if you've got something that you're really focused on working for right now, I would highly, highly recommend you just shelve alcohol for a fixed period of time. You can decide how long it is, but don't let anyone tell you that you shouldn't. Like, if you know when you should be drinking less or when would be a good time to cut it out. You don't need someone to tell you. You don't need to sit here and tell you, I got sober, so should you. If you have a good relationship with alcohol. And I'm guessing if you're listening this far in, maybe you don't, and maybe you are actually interested in getting sober for a while. It doesn't have to be forever. That's one key thing. But if you do 6 months sober, I guarantee when you go back to drink, your approach to it will be very much more focused, more present, and you'll do it with a lot more intention than you would have done before. So I think it's good to take breaks from drinking at regular intervals in life. Honestly, it's something that I will definitely do again in future. Maybe even when I get back to the UK, I will do it again. I'm heading back in about 3 weeks. Honestly, though, I haven't been drinking that much over the last month and a half or so, with the exception of the big night out I had with some Colombian friends. But one of the friends I hadn't seen for like 2 years, and he taught me a lot of Spanish, and we just had a great time. And I don't even regret it. You look back on some nights and you're like, that wasn't even fun. I regret everything. I wish I hadn't said that. I look back on that night. I was like, it was so good to see Lerin again. It was so good to spend that time together, and I'm glad we made the most of it, because from what I experienced, we really did make the most of it. We absolutely sent it. I mean, it was pretty rough the next day, but sometimes it's worth it. But honestly, that's the only major amount of drinking I've done in the last 18 months or so. No, nearly 2 years. In the last 2 years, actually, I remember one of the worst times I went out drinking was in Barcelona before I went on my trip to South America. I went out for my birthday. You can kind of let it slide because it's my birthday, right? But I got so drunk, I don't really remember much of the night after maybe 11 p.m. And I ended up separated from all my friends, walking alone at night on the phone to my brother in Barcelona. And then I fell down the stairs of the metro in the middle of the night. Shameful. This is really exposing myself. But, I don't really care. These are lessons you can learn from. I look back on these and I think, what was I doing? And if I ever need a reason to not go out and not, I think about these events now so much. I just don't think it's worth it anymore. And once you've had that realization, you really will control your drinking. But having that realization is hard. So I would recommend taking a fixed period of time where you say, look, I'm not going to touch it, and really, really be strict about that. And a good technique is to offer to drive your friends every time you go out. Non-alcoholic beer is not that bad. You get used to it very quickly. I did drink. Okay, so some people will say that I wasn't completely sober because I was drinking non-alcoholic beer at times. And the first 6 months I didn't really, but then I grew to kind of like the taste, because I like the taste of beer, but I don't like the effects of beer as much. So, I did drink non-alcoholic beer. You can find that balance that works for you. Be careful with fake spirits and fake wines and fake beers. Sometimes they can give you the effects of a hangover, which is crazy because there's no alcohol in there. But sometimes they give you the effects of a hangover. It's kind of like a sugar crash or something like that. But it's really not fun. So I'd recommend being very careful with that. If you can, just find something to replace what you would usually be drinking, whether it's a lemonade. You get to a point where you don't want to drink 4 lemonades and 4 pints of lemonade in a night. So just drink water, bro. Just don't ruin your fitness progress. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience with sobriety. I hope this has been informative and interesting to someone out there who maybe is considering just getting sober for a while. Maybe they're considering permanent sobriety. Maybe they're considering exploring faith, and they think, oh, maybe it would be a good idea to get sober. Maybe they have some fitness goals or something like that, and they've realized that alcohol is really holding them back. I really hope that this message is clear. Honestly, you will feel fantastic. Your body will get used to not having alcohol in the system. Things like your skin will improve. You'll notice your skin looks better. I don't know how to describe. You'll lose a bit of puffiness in your face and things like that. Maybe you'll look leaner. Depending on how much, it depends on how much you drink currently, but I'm imagining if you've got to this part of the podcast, you might have a not ideal relationship with alcohol. So yeah, I'd highly recommend taking a break. Honestly, I think the best thing to do is to take a fixed break rather than just try and cut down, because in my experience, just trying to cut down just doesn't work, because you don't make the changes to stop putting yourself in the same situations where you can get drunk. At first, you really have to make that call, stop going to pubs to meet your friends, go to meet them early in the day, go to cafes, get used to spending Fridays and Saturdays in, if you can, and just focus on a hobby, or maybe book yourself for a hobby that doesn't involve drinking on those nights. You'll get there. You'll find a balance that works, because the most tempting thing is when you get that text on a Saturday afternoon or a Saturday evening, it says, let's go to the pub tonight for a couple of beers. And it's not going to be a couple of beers. And you've worked a week and you feel like you deserve it. You don't deserve it, man. Have some discipline, and say no, kick it for a while, and yeah, see what a difference it makes. And I guarantee you'll come away from it with a good experience. Honestly, I don't know anyone that's gone sober who's had a bad experience with it. The only thing is, I thought, which was one of the reasons that I wanted to reintroduce, because maybe I missed out on certain social situations, but that is a little bit of a weak reason to start drinking again. Honestly, the balance I found at the moment, I'm very happy with, but I can only have this balance because I took the time off, and I think that's something that people really need to understand. I'm qualified. I've done my time, and maybe 18 months is not long enough. And I know, for example, Chris Williamson did, I think it was 1,000 days sober. That's really impressive. 1,000 days is over 3 years, isn't it? I just think about that. No, it's not. It's just under 3 years. But it's a very admirable thing to do. So yeah, I hope you gained something from this episode. I hope maybe it inspires some of you to just give up beer for 6 months, 3 months, 1 month. 1 month's not long enough. 1 month is not long enough. 3 to 6 months minimum. So yeah, hope you enjoyed. If you're interested in alternative self-improvement, I have a Telegram group. I will be posting my personal manifesto exercise. If you listen to episode 2 of the podcast, I made a guide of how to create this. It's basically a way to work out your own personal goals and move your life in the direction that you want, as opposed to the direction that other people might have influenced you in thinking you want. So yeah, if you are interested in doing that exercise and sharing that exercise with me, or maybe finding someone to hold you accountable, or just discussing alternative self-improvement in general, faith, Buddhism, Stoicism, going sober, travel, solo travel, being a digital nomad, anything like that, anything that I'm passionate about, or anything that you've got ideas about for this podcast, join the Telegram group. There's a link in the description in the show notes. And I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you very much for listening. Leave a good rating on Spotify if you enjoyed, and if you learned something, and like and subscribe on YouTube. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next episode.